Public Radio. I'm Jerome McDonnell. Today we're discussing the history and influence of evangelical Christianity in American political life with Frank Schaffer. He's the author of the book Crazy for God. And as he alluded to earlier, Frank and his father, Francis Schaffer, helped form the religious right around the issue of abortion. Frank incorporated abortion and cultural themes into some of his films, and they really caught on with a wider audience. The Schaffers galvanized unlikely allies like Catholics and Calvinist Protestants to overcome theology and dogma and forge a political powerhouse.
You know, it's odd that the theological differences have been papered over for political expediency. So, you know, the evangelicals may all be coming at how to come to God or to Christ from different points of view, often arguing with each other and writing each other off, but they have united in their antipathy towards the U.S. government, which they feel has gone off the rails, and which they feel has to be replaced by people like them to bring the country in line with their worldview. And, of course, abortion is where the thing started, but it's gone much further than that now. You know, when you have people running around saying that, you know, the person they're running against is probably the Antichrist, and if not, then at least an Arab who's not an American, and if not that, then certainly a Muslim, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, this has gone a long way beyond a Supreme Court ruling you disagree with, and really, you know, what you've become is a party of almost revolution, and certainly in some ways, you know, not working any longer within the system. I mean, genuinely countercultural. So, you know, I think that's where it all went, but the energy that was there at the beginning on the issue of Roe v. Wade is something that I think was not only genuine, but timely, because, you know, I look back at the Roe v. Wade decision, as I talk about in the book, as a mistake. And I'm not only talking about the morality of it, I mean, even from the tactical side, if you were pro-abortion or pro-choice, you know, to do this fait accompli and basically, you know, shake it in the face of a huge chunk of conservative or evangelical America, you know, tactically it would have been much better to take time and go state by state and just see how it all shakes out across the country. Probably would have achieved much of the same result, but really what I think Roe v. Wade did achieve unintentionally was a 30-year dominance of politics by the evangelical right, because that issue and that issue alone has energized the whole movement. You take that away, and all the rest of the stuff would be issues, but never the kind of issues which would so galvanize people and keep them organized and angry for such a big, long stretch of time. And so, oddly, Dad and I sort of provided the fulcrum for something that went so far beyond anything we could have envisioned, and took on a completely different side. You know, the problem is when it all becomes about theology rather than politics, you no longer have common sense and expediency. And I'll just give you an example right now, and that is you have, for instance, Republicans who have been saying the right things to evangelicals to get their votes while doing nothing much about the issue of abortion itself. Whereas you have someone like Barack Obama, for instance, who has voted pro-choice the whole time, but who says that abortion is a moral issue, that it should be discussed as such, that people who hold opposite opinions to him are reasonable people and have to be accommodated. And he puts a plank in this year's Democratic platform for the first time since Roe v. Wade, calling abortion a moral issue and saying that the number of abortions should be diminished in America and that there should be government programs to see that that happens, as in for mothers, for children, for families, and so forth. So the real question is going to be, I think, for those people who are pro-life in the future, of which I myself am one, and have not changed my opinion on that. Do we want to actually see less abortions in a practical way? Do we actually care about that? Or is it just a political issue? So would you rather vote for someone who will have programs that will actually result in more children being born and cared for and given health care and decent schools and help for their mothers and all the rest of it? Or would you rather have a politician like George Bush who talks a good game but cuts all the programs that could provide some assistance for people and actually create an environment in which there would be more children who would be born rather than aborted? So I think the problem with theologizing these issues and turning them into kind of black and white, morally fraught questions means that common sense and the actual goal that you have, which is the care of mothers and children in a compassionate, Christ-like way if you're a Christian, sometimes is lost for the rhetoric. So we're in an ironic situation that we keep voting for a party, being the Republicans, that's done very little about the issue itself in terms of taking care of women and children, cut all the programs and or starved them of funding one way or another, has felt government is the source of all national problems, that, whether it's government regulation of banks that's now led to this incredible cataclysm in our financial sector, or whether it's government regulation in other areas or programs for dependent mothers and this kind of thing. But they keep quoting the right Bible verse, as it were, and so they get elected. Now we have some really hard choices to make, and I think really we should see the political sphere as the political sphere and stop looking for people who quote Bible verses who satisfy our theology and start looking for people who can actually deliver what we say we care about, which in the case of abortion, for instance, is a climate which actually values and cares for human life. And that may be a Nixon goes to China kind of phenomena. Wouldn't it be ironic if a Democrat actually created programs that reduced abortion significantly in this country while leaving abortion legal, rather than Republicans who talk about the issue and have done nothing to actually help people?
If Barack Obama becomes president, odds are he appoints a Supreme Court justice that doesn't strike down Roe v. Wade. If John McCain becomes president, he appoints one that does.
Yeah, and you know what? As soon as Roe v. Wade struck down, since most of the states in this country have laws on the books which mirror Roe v. Wade, I think a lot of people don't understand this. I mean, it's amazing how we don't understand how our own system works. We get so caught up, I think, in the ideology. Let me just explain something. As someone who's involved in this issue a long time and, has paid a lot of attention to it since the 70s, what Roe v. Wade does is strike down state regulation of abortion. If you strike down Roe v. Wade, it just simply throws it back to the states, most of which now have enacted laws very much like Roe v. Wade. So in terms of the actual number of states where abortion would become illegal, very little would change. Places like New York and California, nothing would change. You'd have some other states where you would have restrictions on abortion. A few would outlaw it completely, maybe 4 or 5. And then there would be some fighting over the rest of it. But what would happen is the will of the people would prevail, it would become a democratic issue, and the best polls on this issue are as follows. And neither side would be happy, because this is what the polls show. Most Americans would want to keep abortion legal in some form, but limit it far beyond where Roe v. Wade does. So it would be more like some of the European countries where you'd have a cutoff at, for instance, 12 weeks and another one at 20. More consultation with a doctor's panel, for instance, for late-term abortions, this kind of thing. It wouldn't be as easy access because Roe was very extreme compared to the rest of the world. But this conservative idea that they put forward really is a kind of a political trick that if Roe was reversed, abortion would become illegal is nonsense. The real issue with abortion is not a court-decided or legislative issue. It's an issue of public morality and an issue of individual hearts and minds. So the fact of the matter is who Obama and McCain appoint could change the destiny of Roe. It would actually not do much about abortion. I mean, we have an abortion pill. We have very modern techniques now of, all these suction abortions that have come about since then. The frank, honest thing for people to say, if they're going to be honest about it, is that we're in a culture that has a certain mentality about human life. That mentality needs to be changed, and the real issue is when you have a Barack Obama or a John McCain talking, forget the law for a moment, who brings an ethic of wanting to help human beings, live full and complete lives, and who doesn't. And I don't think that's a black and white situation. I think McCain is a decent and compassionate human being. I'm not saying he's terrible. I just think in this particular instance, oddly enough, despite the legal strategy of Obama in terms of where his heart's at and what he's talked about in terms of wanting to help people and the programs he would want to initiate, and this plank he put in the Democratic platform, I think shows he's a fundamentally conservative, family-oriented person in this area, and abortion would stay legal, as it probably would under John McCain, by the way, at least on a state-by-state basis. But maybe there would be some programs that would actually change the attitude people have, and to me, that's much more important than the legal technicalities.
You're listening to Worldview from Chicago Public Radio. I'm Jerome McDonnell, speaking with Frank Schaffer. He is the author of the book Crazy for God, How I Grew Up as One of the Elect, Helped Found the Religious Right, and Lived to Take It All or Almost All of It Back. You mentioned the early days of when you and your father were making these films and gathering together with different groups than you were used to. You'd lived in Switzerland all your life, and
right.
There you were with people from the Catholic Church, getting involved with them and getting their help and assistance on these things, and getting acclimated with different evangelical leaders in the United States.
Right.
Pat Robertson, all the rest. Why did that feel so right at the time?
Well, I don't know if it ever felt so right. It felt weird from the beginning, but not for political reasons, but just practical ones. I mean, let me set the stage for you here. I grew up in this little mission. There were times when the funding was so low, we'd have meat once a week. A chicken wing was, what you got for Sunday dinner, little pieces stretched a long way. My dad never owned a car after he moved to Europe. He worked on the corner of his bed on a tray, and he sat in a rocking chair. His bedroom was his office.